suggestions in improving the content and style of the document itself. I'd like to take this opportunity to express our grateful thanks. I always recall this to our Honorable Prime Minister for having personally reviewed the policy. I should say he spent several sittings with his colleagues to look at every policy that has been formulated and made some very interesting, pragmatic, and innovative suggestions. It is thus obvious to me that you are embarking on an important initiative with wider ramifications on the many dimensions of India's educational endeavor. In this context, I'm happy to note that the vision of the open network you just now presented, what you have got in your mind about the networks, is to influence transformation of higher education in India as we have envisaged under the NEP. Among other things, I see that TOE plans to invest resources to build institutional competencies, systems, and strategies on one hand, and leadership development and research on the other hand. I'm also happy to note that TUE plans to carry out policy research, a very critical element in many of these kind of initiatives, because on this we build up the future directions and improvements and sophistication of such kind of an endeavor and report the outcome of the same periodically. Let me also use this opportunity to greet the teachers all over India. You happen to hold this on a Teachers' Day, a very auspicious day, and we wish the teachers all over India the very best. And I should say, when we gave a title to the teachers' discussion and a chapter on teachers' discussion in the NEP, we titled it the heart of the matter. We couldn't find a better word than saying that it is heart of the matter as far as the education policy is concerned. At a time when there is an awakening in the society about the need to transform the present practices in education towards achieving a 21st century knowledge-driven society, the initiatives such as yours, Dr. Rajan Saxena, are extremely crucial, apt, and timely. I shall say a few words of this juncture about the policy, more to give you a flavor about the type of changes that we need to adopt to transform our educational system. A major policy shift in the higher education, I won't go into the school education part of it, even though there is quite a lot of innovative recommendation that we have made, something which is very critical so far as changing the way in which the school education is going, whether it is at the level of school children, the early childhood care and education, the teacher preparation, the teacher mentorship, and the rest of it, where we have addressed in quite a bit of detail, but I don't want to go into the details of this. I will restrict myself into a little bit of some of the key policy items with regard to the higher education, where the policy shift is in the undergraduate education emphasis on holistic and multidisciplinary education with a 4-year undergraduate program. Our present undergraduate program, as you know, it seeks a mastery in silos. Policy would simply have called for improving job readiness on day one. This policy recognizes that such an approach is dangerously out of step with a world that is rapidly changing. It recognizes that students must be given a much broader multidisciplinary foundation so that they can adopt and reinvent themselves as necessary over their entire working lives. The 4-year program that we have recommended will provide students with opportunities to explore their interests and develop a broad base. I also want to stress the holistic aspect of undergraduate education, which aims to develop all capacities. This is one of the key elements with respect to what you call as a liberal education or holistic education. It is not only the question of developing the capacity which is related to just the intellectual part of it, but aesthetic, social, physical, emotional, and moral capacities in an integrated manner. This policy takes a firm view that vocational education must be integrated within the undergraduate education. Not only is this consistent with the principles of holistic development, but it gives students an avenue into the world of work that will be increasingly important in the 21st century. I want to clearly emphasize this point because we tend to have a very narrow conception of the vocational education and we therefore undervalue it. With advances in technologies like the artificial intelligence and augmented reality, we clearly foresee an increasing number of hybrid jobs where a human vocational skills will complement the capabilities of high-tech equipment. The higher education system is therefore necessary to prepare students for such jobs. In fact, in our policy, we have also said that the gender enrollment, the gross enrollment ratio, we have to step it up to 50%. And this, one of the premise for this kind of a thing is not so much that we change the whole capacity of the higher education alone, but the vocational education as a as enunciated here with respect to a part of an undergraduate education and even an early vocational education in the secondary school education is going to substantially add the number with regard to the gross enrollment ratio with respect to the total education scenario by 2040 or 2045. There is a similarly a compelling case for moving the school teacher education to higher education. I have brought this specifically because today happens to be a teacher's day, and it's quite important that we say something about what have we done with respect to the teacher's education and how do we try to make sure that they not only perform better, but their status in the society is also made better. Not only does it immediately raise the kind of recommendation that you have made of school teachers by placing their profession at par with other options for the graduates. But it also recognizes that only higher education system can provide school teachers with knowledge base broad enough and deep enough to strengthen our schooling systems. I'm sure this and other proposed policies that are central to create a cadre of well-trained, motivated, and deeply committed teachers is sure to transform the teacher's role and their stature in the society. The four-year system will also give students the option to pursue undergraduate research, and an honors degree will grant them direct access to the PhD program. When it comes to research, India's low output of high quality research not only places us at a serious short-term disadvantage on the strategic and economic fronts, but there is also a severe long-term risk because quality research is essential for quality education. The present fragmented system of small colleges cannot sustain quality teaching and research programs. Thus, the policy calls for an urgent consolidation of higher education institutions with focus on research and teaching, complemented by a system of degree-granting institutions, autonomous colleges, that focus on providing high-quality education. The policy also highlights the critical need to better manage research at all levels: pure research, applied research, translational research, and research to address specific needs of industry and other areas. This management of research will be provided by the National Research Foundation, whose primary role will be to nurture a vibrant research ecosystem through adequate funding, mentoring, and careful monitoring. And this will particularly be focused onto the 900 and odd universities where today there is the state universities to say, and also some of the other universities where the present level of research and the quality of research and the outcomes of the research is far less than what we would like to have. The National Research Foundation will ensure that research proposals are selected purely based on merit by following a rigorous peer review process. In addition to funding projects of critical importance, such as mitigating the impact of climate change and so on, NRF will support multidisciplinary research in arts and humanities, social sciences, science and mathematics, engineering and technology, including educational technology. In fact, EdTech research must play a crucial role not only in achieving a higher gross enrollment ratio by improving access to quality education, but in improving the resilience of the entire educational system from disruptions such as the one we are facing today. And we have adopted several new abnormal methods in trying to deal with this, like the online learning, the blended learning, and things of that kind. In this regard, NRF will work closely with the newly recommended entity designated as the National Educational Technology Forum. Finally, I would like to say a few words about the reformed regulatory structure of higher education. These changes will ensure that the distinct functions of regulation, accreditation, funding, and academic standard setting will be performed by independent and empowered bodies to minimize conflicts of interest and to create the necessary checks and balances in the system. The light but tight regulatory net framework reflects one of the core principles of the policy to improve our educational system. It is essential to specify clear goals and to ensure the individuals are empowered to explore multiple ways to achieve those goals within the framework of the accountability. Even though it's difficult to outline all the aspects of the national education policy in such a short time, nevertheless, it gives you all a flavor of what is in store for the country and for the government's determination to transform the educational system. Only the other day, when the Prime Minister was addressing the governor, the chancellors or the vice chancellors of the various universities, he made clear that this policy is now by the government. No efforts will be spared to make sure that it is implemented in letter and spirit, so where the policy is concerned. So it is again this backdrop. I am very happy to see that TOE is launching this new initiative, something which will very effectively add to the overall mechanisms that we need to introduce into the system to make a quality education real in the country among all segments of education. Thus, I wish the new initiative TOE, Dr. Ranjan Saxena and Mr. Dr. Ranjan Paul and all other colleagues the very best success. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kasturi Ranganji, for your blessings. Your words would always echo in our group and in our meetings. And I'm pretty confident that the confidence that you have really proposed in us will ensure that we continue to be on track. And we will come back to you after 1 year to tell you what we have been able to do. And we'll again like to hear from you at that point of time. May I now invite Mr. T.V. Mohan Das Pai to really start the conversation. But before I do that, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to be running a live poll at this point of time as we really go in the conversation. So some questions are going to be put up over here, and you would just have to really take your alternative. And the results will be put up on the screen itself. So, and I'm pretty confident that somewhere or the other, as we really proceed, Mohan would find some of these kinds of questions as useful as we really take the as he takes the conversation forward. Over to you, Mohan.
Thank you very much, Doc. Dr. Rangan, it has been an extraordinary policy because you seem to have given us a policy which has met with broad approval across the country, very varied views. People have not been able to criticize it as something that is not workable, as something out of reach. There have been some muted criticism by some people who have not read the entire policy, especially on language. Can you talk to us about the process that the government followed to get this policy out and the various stakeholder consultations that you had across the country? What were the views of stakeholders? What were the concerns of stakeholders? And in the process of consultation and in the process of listening to people, did you have any initial views? Did you change your views? What were the strong points that people made? And did people really want reforms at this stage of our education? I'm asking a lot of questions as part of the stakeholder consultation because you've been through an enormous amount and the result has been a policy which is broadly welcomed by all. So the process and what happened during the consultation process.
Thank you, Mohan. Anyhow, I'm so happy to see you here. But we seem to be nowadays getting into the habit of seeing it in the virtual mode only and not in the real mode. I hope being Bangaloreans, we should be able to do that much earlier than what is now can be envisaged under the COVID conditions. So I'm anyhow happy to see you, your smiling face, and of course the mixed question that you can pose to me. So let me say about the process. You know, when Javadekar ji, at that time the Minister for Education, made a phone call and told me that I'm going to put you as the chairman of the National Education Policy Formulation Committee, and that the previous work related to this certainly exists, but it has run into some roadblocks with respect to certain very important provisions of the policy. And that we want you to not only look at that, but I leave it to you and the team that we are setting up with you to look at the totality of it. We give you the complete freedom. Now, this is an important statement to make because he never told us that you build upon a policy which is on which 4 years of work was done earlier, and 1.5 years with TSR Subramaniam chairing it, in which I also know you had very closely interacted in that phase, because at that time we were also working together in a Karnataka education policy. One of the best things that happened was that policy and the Karnataka education policy, we aligned it in such a way that as soon as a national policy decision is taken, we are prepared for Karnataka too. So this is a very interesting strategy that was done. But what I want to say is that we were told that you have the freedom. Then he asked about the fact that since so much of work has been done, enormous amount of database exists, analysis exists, certain types of conclusions exist. So what do you think about the fact that we can do this a little faster now that you have got all the things? So in my enthusiasm, because I was really driving down from my house to office, and it was on the road that we were chatting. And in my exam said, maybe he asked me, can we do it in 3 months? Then somehow the quick reaction to this was that is too less. Whatever, even if it means copying that particular thing and putting it in a new cover, even then a 3 months time is not sufficient. So I told that at least we need 6 months. Even that was a very adventurous statement, simply because I did not know the magnitude of the complexity of the type of thing that we are committing to the Honorable Minister. Then he said, these are the members of the committee. Most of the members were not known to me. He had made his own choices, and except one, M.K. Sridhar, whom I knew from an earlier knowledge commission. Otherwise, there was nobody whom I knew, including Vasudha, I was not knowing at that particular time. But then I said that whatever is your committee, we will accept it and we will just go ahead. The moment we sat for the first meeting, one of the things that I asked all the members is to make sure that they have gone through those 4 years of work, at least whatever the elements of it, what exactly has been done, what kind of opinions have been sought, and what kind of analysis of the opinions have been done, and what kind of conclusion one has been arrived at, what were the areas where there has been serious differences which were even brought up at the Lok Sabha Parliament, and there have been objections, and which made us government to rethink on redoing the policy. So many members were quite knowledgeable in this kind of a thing, but we all came to the conclusion that there is a huge amount of data, opinions, and we need to structure the opinions, because the opinions were, some of them are repetitive. You know, there are groups which can easily amass 10,000 opinions of the same type and send letters saying that as if it is the nation's opinion. So these kind of things were artifacts there of blobs of opinions. Then there are distributed opinions. Then there are strong opinions, weak opinions, and then there are objective opinions and opinions that comes out of inadequate information and inadequate assessment. So there were these kind of things. So we wanted to decide to make sure that these are all properly separated out. And then we have to also see whether we can use the modern data analytics method to look at systematics and those kind of a thing and get nice graphs or patterns and things like that. So first time itself, we got into the job of analyzing it in the most scientific and mathematical manner, rather than purely trying to come to conclusions for this. So this is one of the first things we did with all the data. And we came to the conclusion that there is no correlation between the multiple inputs that are there. There are no patterns which are emerging. And there are areas where we can certainly seriously pursue some of those, whether it's school education, college education, or other types of education. But they were not the result of things where a lot of in-depth analysis has been done or discussions have taken place, and whether they really represent a substantial opinion which can be a kind of it can provide the weightage to the policy itself. So this is where the members had a little worry. And I also agreed that this cannot be the kind of a policy where the weightage is inadequate with respect to certain of those things. And if they dominate the kind of a document which we finally produce, then we are in trouble, simply because of the fact that there will be large variations in the opinions, and they will tear it down, the policy. So we didn't want to give up this thing. And the net result was, after running these analysis, looking at the patterns through big data analytics and things like that, we came to the conclusion, let us start from the fresh. So immediately called up Javadekar ji and told that maybe you should give us a year or a little more, and not the 6 months kind of a thing. Then next day itself, we decided that we announced that whomsoever want to come in this country to come and meet us, discuss it, whether it is individuals, organizations, institutions, and other kinds of agencies representing ideologies and things like that. We are all welcome. We will in a structured form, we will meet all of them. So, but then that is where it really started as a flood. It's a bit of a barrage, I should say. And the very next day, Jayaprakash Narayan flew down from Hyderabad and made a half-a-day presentation on school education. Very next day after releasing this kind of a thing. So from then onward, there has been a continuous discussion with several agencies. I want to say the number of agencies, there have been institutions, individuals, academics, religious groups, whether it is Jains, whether it is Sikhs, whether it is even, I should say, Buddhists. They had their own way of looking at this. And Jains, of course, had their own way of looking at the education. And in fact, it went to the extent that the Acharya, this Jain Muni Vidyasagar ji wanted me to visit where he is camping, because he does camping at different locations. I went to Raipur personally and spent one day, half a day with him, and had a good discourse of what Jain's view about education is and all that kind of a thing. So it has been a very, very extensive and intensive consultation process of all segments of the society with respect to whether it is academics, whether it is institutional, whether it is education promoters, whether it is the policies, or whether it is institution like your own corporate world. They had their own very strong views on certain aspects of education. And then we had, of course, the Association of Universities, the Teachers Association, the School Teachers Association. You say anything is connected with education in this country, and you will see something like 200, 300 of those agencies are listed in the earlier part of you also saw that particular thing. So that is really the crux of what we try to do to solicit opinion. And then what you wanted to know is that this particular opinion obviously had to be synthesized, and that did involve quite a bit. There are opinions where we need to hear the people correctly, so you prepare them to come, they present it to you. A good example is that of Anita Kaul, who wanted to tell us about the neurosciences, the cognitive sciences for youngsters. How does the brain work, and how does it change after the age of 8, and what kind of structural systems to create in the education, whether the students, optimization of the students' ability and growth and evolution is in conformity with the kind of education that we are going to give. So that kind of a thing. So this is not something which can be just written down in the piece of letter. So she came 3 times to meet us, provide with her team how exactly we do this. And that is the one that became the basis of the ECCE, the Early Childhood Care and Education. If you wanted to say that 0 to 3 years, there is a one way to look at the child, 3 to 8, there is another way to look at the child. Even in that, we have got every year to look at the child, and then go to the preparatory and the middle phase before you climb into the 4-year secondary. There's a clear-cut scientific rationale. And this was promoted by a person like her, and with many other, we consulted later many other people. So it became clear that science here dominates, because science has changed between the last policy and now. And in the process of better understanding of the brain, the policy has to change. So that is one strategy, where something like fundamental logic and science drives the policy. The second, of course, is that there is a general feeling about from the social angle. And therefore, for example, the question of inadequacy in underdeveloped areas and geographies which need to be attended to, special zones that we put down. This is another kind of a thing. There are questions which are related to disabled, disadvantaged. So we need to look at that. The very poor aspects of teachers with respect to how the school teachers are dealt with, they had very strong feelings and very strong representation. Then there in the higher education, research was one of the things many people were talking about. The industrial phase, there is a complaint that there is very little that comes out of the research which can be used by the industry. So you see there is a pattern in those kind of a thing. We need to look at it in greater detail, make sure that clearly we understand what the lacuna is and where the policy can make a change to that kind of a lacuna. So these are the kind of ways in which we dealt with it. A large body of consultations, a large amount of databases, a good amount of critical analysis, and then discuss it directly with them or internally with an expert committee, or to directly discuss at the committee itself, and then it moves into a policy framework. We just make a paragraph about it. That paragraph then has to be converted into policy. So there are people who will really work on how do you create a statement with regard to the policy after do that. Even that had to be had a style. And we went through the best style that is possible. People like Manjul Bhargav were very good in those kind of thinking process and crafting process. You know Manjul, how he thinks about it.
Yeah.
So these are the kind of people, and there were Anurag Bell, and then there were people, even our friend Kama, Vasudha Kama. So these are the kind of people who worked on those kind of things, carefully make sure that we don't slip up in the way in which, even though policy may be good, the statement becomes slip up. And you know, in one language case, it happened like that.
Yeah.
So this kind of thing, oh well. So ultimately, I think we had a policy where those kind of things were very minimal, very carefully drafted, but very sound in terms of the input that we have received and the way we dealt with the input in the context of the contemporary times. There's a long story of 1.5 years or so, but I personally feel that there is in this country a good communication network between the very different parties. So everybody makes sure that they have been consulted. There is always a question of whether the consultation was very productive or it was not productive. It is not, for us, it is not the question of productive consultation versus unproductive. It is the process of consultation, which is as different from the two, because they are happy that they have been also consulted. And so when they see their name in terms of the people, agencies consulted, they don't have any comment on the report in the book itself. But what they say is, oh yes, we were consulted and it is there. So that is the spirit of the people also of this country. So we were keeping all this in mind. We wrote the final policy and it did receive that kind of this thing. There are a few things what you said, we can discuss the special issues which came up while discussing this. But by and large, I should say, we followed a democratic, and I also want to say, you have also asked, how did the government deal with you at that time? Yeah. These were the 2.5 years in which Javadekar called the committee for 3 to 4 times, and we reviewed the progress. But I want to say, in fairness to the system, they never told you look at it in this fashion or you look at it. It was never there.
Never.
Committee was totally left to itself to decide on what is good and what is not good for the country. They had a full trust in the system. And I think it paid off. Simply it paid off, because nobody could find that we went after one idea or one ideal or one ideology. That was not the purpose. We wanted a good report for the country, a good educational system, and we made, the government helped us by saying that they reviewed it. They certainly looked at where we have reached and so on, but at no point gave us any input that could have influenced the nature of the policy of our thinking process. I consider that as a very important element of developing this policy. So on one side, I should thank the government and the present Prime Minister and the Education Minister. And on the other side, I should say the enormous enthusiasm of the public at the time when we announced that we are going to consult all of you. And that response has been really, I think it is memorable, I should say. And now, of course, reciprocated by the, now once the policy was announced, you see another type of torrent that is happening now. All these. So I think between the two, I think there's all the reason to be satisfied with what we did.
Yes, I think it's a wonderful process, very democratic. You listen to everybody, and I think took everybody's view, distilled it, and like a true scientist and a technocrat, you went purely by data, by logic, by reason, and that is very strong. Doc, you know, how did the Prime Minister react? I'm sure you had a meeting with the Prime Minister, and Prime Minister has given a very strong endorsement of your national education policy. He feels very strongly about it. What were the Prime Minister's view? I mean, you can tell us whatever publicly you want to say, because his endorsement and his standing by the policy is extremely important for the policy to be made workable.
One thing very important is not that physically we had to meet him.
Yeah.
Because Even the very fact that we meet Prime Minister, probably this is my intuition. Now, please don't take it as any. The very fact that we are meeting Prime Minister and people will say that they are taking instructions from the Prime Minister instead of saying that he is also trying to know what is happening. I think he kept himself away. I
Oh,
want to say he didn't want to give even an iota of an idea that this policy is being developed, and I think his mind was very clear. You create a policy, you put it in the public domain, you see what's acceptability. If it is acceptable, it's mine. If it is not acceptable, we'll correct it.
oh,
So he was very positive. He was very clear that he doesn't want to simply show that he is also looking with the committee into it, giving guide, nothing of the side. But at the same time, when we submitted the thing, he went through his own way of reviewing the whole thing on his own. With some people who were not as a part of this, I don't know whether you were called to also consult a little bit here and there, but people were not directly involved. So this helped him to get an independent assessment, and his own way of looking at things is quite incisive, I should say. So I understand he made several sittings on the
seven
policy.
sittings.
Several sittings. One of the sitting was 3 to 4 hours he spent with people. He asked really pertinent, pragmatic questions which are really the issues on the ground. It's not the question of anything. And he has also suggested very interesting things like saying that we should have a 50% bagless days. The children should not be carrying the bag. Or we should make sure that the neighborhood facilities, whether it is a hospital, whether it is an industry, other kind of thing, the youngsters in school should certainly have an interaction with. We cannot have a system where you have a school here, youngsters are studying there, and you've got some very interesting institutions around, and they don't have no feel of what kind of thing. So that is other kind of thing. He was fully in tune with the fact that the teachers should not be often transferred from one location to another. It disrupts the way in which they can build up their own relation with the students and other kinds of activities. So, these are the kind of things. He made very searching questions, extremely good suggestions, and some of them have found their way into the policy. So his role has been not one of hearing the progress. His role has been one of being actively involved in looking at the various provisions of the policy and making sure that it has also his satisfaction. He wanted to make sure about, and with people who also know this business. So it is not that he was taking a unilateral view. It was done with that kind of a thing. The net result is that he found the policy to be open. The general consensus that has been arrived at through a public domain information and the way he himself looked at it, I think there was a reasonable the consonance between the two, and therefore in letter and spirit, the policy which we submitted, the policy that has come out of all this public domain related scrutiny, the scrutiny, state minister scrutiny, intensive scrutiny, all of them, if you look at it, I think they only added value to the whole document, but he never changed the letter and spirit of the document. And that is where we stand. So Prime Minister obviously was happy because the country has backed it, and that is one of the most important things so far as he is concerned. He was not worried whether one small segment is supporting or other. He was happy that the whole country has supported him in this particular initiative. He has certainly seen it himself, and there is full reason why the country is supporting. And therefore, he declared that this is our policy now. And then once he declared it as a policy, he also declared in the recent Vice Chancellor's conference that we will do everything to translate it into ground reality in letter and spirit. So that categorically, that statement has also been made. And I should also say, in fairness, his own outlook about these kind of activities, that he has been very generous in telling us that the committee did a good job.
Oh, yes.
Hear this, and he was so wonderful in trying to, I can't use the language that he himself came out with in trying to pay its compliment to the committee. So it's a consequence of an evaluation by his very incisive mind of maybe 2 years of what has happened to this policy. And that was his final observation.
That's brilliant. I think the fact that you had full freedom to come to a conclusion, that you took all the inputs and nobody was able to influence you, shows the transparency and the freedom that you got. And that's very, very important for people in this country to listen to. But tell me one small matter. Between the time you put it up, the draft for public consultation, and finally the policy which came out, were there any changes which you thought was very important based upon feedback?
No, I want to say there is one suggestion, for example, we made that we need a national education commission. Okay.
Oh,
Now, this will be an apex body
yeah.
and oversee the entire education because education cuts across several departments of the government and other activities. So obviously, when you have multiple departments of the government, multiple institutions under the government funding, and then there are institutions which are private, but there is a very conglomerate of a huge system which touches several elements of the activity in the country. I think the natural thing is that this kind of a thing has to be handled at the prime minister's level. Space has, and even in a very small scale, if you remember, when
Yeah.
we created the space, it is under the prime minister, only because of the fact that we had to make sure the impact of the space is spread about various departments. The water department uses it, the environmental department uses it, oceanic department uses it, the mining department uses it, the fishing department uses it, agriculture department uses it. So you see there is a multiple uses to which, and communication systems, education, the telemedicine and things of that kind. So there is a whole host of activities which that space will touch. So initiative to make sure that the concerned areas, people don't create turf wars between various activities. And this kind of a new input that is coming in as a sort of a new technology and a capability, he made that prime minister keeps the whole thing, provides the direction. One prime minister gives the direction, it's accepted in the country. So this is what we had in mind when we thought that education now touches all the facets of national life. And so we should have a prime minister. But you know, there are also the questions. Would it be construed as if the party in power is trying to control the education? So I think that could be one of the. This is coming out of my mind. If I'm wrong, I am responsible. Don't think that it is somebody else is wrong. But I would assume that he doesn't want to give any such impression that he want to control the. He will certainly review. He's going to decide on the money to be given, other resources to be kept. Certainly, he make people accountable. That there is no question. But to be in charge means you can also do a lot of other directions and so on. He has said that let the national, there's going to be a national commission for education, and which is a modified version of an existing institution which consists of a conglomerate of state and government representatives in education. You know, the CABE, Council for the thing. You know, so that institution will be strengthened, and the Minister of the Education, now it's called Ministry of Education, as you know. It is
Yeah.
not no longer MHRD. So the Minister of Education will chair that. So that is now what has been accepted. Yeah, quite reasonable, quite rational, because don't want to create on this kind of a thing a debate in the country. So probably Prime Minister has avoided all that in the interest of the policy moving forward, and he has kept himself away. But he has said that he will certainly review this, the progress of education, how it is moving vis-a-vis the policy, and how the policy will certainly shape the various assets of the facets of the country's endeavor and development. Certainly something on which he would like to know, keep tab of it, that he will review. He will give direction to make sure that wherever things are inadequate in terms of progress, that the corrections are made. So this kind of supportive role he will give, but he himself will not be chairing anything.
Oh,
That is the difference. So this is one, just to give you an example of the kind of things on which he had a rethinking on our recommendation.
oh, that's wonderful. Now, Doc, education in India is in the concurrent list as per the constitution. The center has a role, the state has a role. And in your policy, you created a broad framework which is very federal in its output. The center has got a role, the states have got a role. Then when you spoke to all the states, I took the feedback from the states. How are the states reacting to a national education policy? Do the states have the freedom to tweak the policy in certain areas, whichever is required, to suit their genius? And what are the states saying right now from whatever feedback you're getting?
I have got something like 10 or 11 letters from the state chief ministers or from the education ministers. This includes the deputy chief minister of Delhi administration. You should read those letters to believe how well they are sold on this policy.
Oh, really? Huh.
Yes. So let me be very clear that there is no ambiguity among even the very, very good government, whether it is the Delhi, whether it is Tripura, whether it is Assam, whether it is Gujarat, whether it is Madhya Pradesh, you look at the spread of letters that I have got. It speaks volumes of the concerned governments in the state endorsing fully and looking forward to its quick implementation and assuring that this is the way we will go the coming year. There's no, and none of them have got even deserved one doubt in this kind of
No.
it. It's extremely satisfying to know that there is this thing. There is a really a full endorsement to this. Other states have not written, but quite likely I understand that because you look at the individuals who have also supported the Congress. There are representatives of the Congress who have seen the good points about this. There may be certainly some things which they would like to also see
Yeah.
in a different way, but by and large, they have their satisfaction with it. You look at individuals like Yogendra Yadav, you should hear him, his views. He can be very, his mind is also incisive. So when you say something, people hear him with all the respect. And I'm happy to see that he says that he was looking for things which you can object to. And after 20 pages after page, you could not find one. So that is the spirit, you know. So if that is the kind of from people who are not particularly in this particular this domain or that domain and that kind of thing, that shows the neutrality of the effort and the kind of objectivity with which we have brought in the recommendation. I do only want to say that it's not tom-tomming something which is this thing, but generally the country balances all the good points and now the weak points. And I think there is a system which operates. Maybe we don't know how it operates. It's very complex how it operates, but it operates in the objective manner. That is the most
Yes.
important. And this is a classic example that it works like that.
Yes, it works like that. That's wonderful. Doc, you know, you were the first commission that if you look at all the previous commission, which very clearly stated the role of the state. State means government, both center and the state. And you said the state has three roles: policy for everybody, all the young people of this country. Second, the state has to set up a regulatory system which is independent of the government, which works independently, with independent bodies which have their own way of working, which is independent of them, so that there's arm's length and no conflict of interest between policy and the execution of policy. And the third, the state as a provider of education services should be put to the same standard as any other provider. For the first time, I think in your policy, you have delineated the role of the state and also said there should be no discrimination between the public schools and the private schools, public state universities and the private universities. Everybody should be treated on par. Now, this is a very, very big statement. What made you have this kind of a clarity? What drove you to it? And how do you see it working? Because it does not work like this in this country so far.
See, one thing, we had, as you know, Mohan, and you were a party to it. There are many private institutions which came and represented their cases, whether it is individually or collectively. They had their own story to tell about this thing. Many of them have gone into the field of education only because of the fact that they can certainly improve the quality of education. Let us not put any kind of doubt on that part of it. Now, once you use the premise that ultimately the objective of all the institutions giving education is one where we need to improve the quality of education and provide the best and excellent education to the future, to the future youngsters or for the future citizens of the country, then that is the fundamental point on which you want to make sure. Where does it come into, where do the other factors come into picture? You have a regulatory structure number, for example. There have been complaints in the regulatory structures, whether it is one agency or another agency, whether the state or central. They had some kind of there are problems with regulation. There was over-regulation. But does the over-regulation lead to better quality? That
No.
also happened. So the people were very much cut up with the system in which the current system under the name of regulation was not doing anything except for the fact the wrong things were happening. So that is where I think the people who matter in terms of accepting certain ways of doing this felt that we are willing to be open. We are willing to put all of, whether it is number of teachers, the subject taught, the outcomes of the school, the money that we are dealing with, the infrastructure that we are. we will put it in the open domain. Everybody can have a look at it, and that year's output is willing to come. And this can be seen both whether it is private school or a public school. You put everybody on the same line, and let the parents also have a look at it. And so we also thought that parents can also make a judgment and send in fact, the accreditation need not be only to the accreditation body. The accreditation can be done by several representatives interested in the particular institution. So we thought even that can be done. In fact, that also from the how can parents decide the accreditation? So people don't even understand the spirit behind this kind of a thing. But what I want to say is, having understood that you have suffered quite a lot, it is like, you have suffered quite a lot in a disease. So we are willing to take a medicine, even if its efficacy is not fully the same, because you're desperate. So in one sense, I feel that we have tried to create an open system. You treat whether it is the private or public at the same level, bring down the openness fully. So we will do a light regulation, tight regulation, but make sure that you show everything that is to be seen. And there are minimal number of parameters. Don't have too many things to be filled up. Teacher has to fill up, for example, every week, the update on this kind. Those things are all not that way. And so there is a trust. I want to say it is the trust component which dominates many areas of this policy, because we think genuinely those who are going to put money in education is going to look for the goodness of the outcomes that are going to come out of the education. There is no reason to a priori start suspecting them that they are out to do something. We have also at several places made the education is for the public good. We have said it. Nobody has objected to the idea. They also said that we have to also compensate. If they are able to justify that the compensation leads to a little increased fees, I don't think people will shut their eyes on those kind of requirements. That is not the issue. That it has to be a public good sense that is there. So we got accepted in that kind of a premise. So I want to say this in the broader context of the policy itself. There is a lot of trust that we have tried to place on the system which gives the education in this country. And we hope that that will be reciprocated and really responded to positively, because that is what the success of this, which essentially means the elements of the culture in which we run systems in this country. I think this particular policy for the first time is attempting to rattle that culture a little bit and see whether the country will respond to this by damping out the old system and create a new system. So if the culture you rattle does damp down to the same original state, then we are going to be in problem. If in the process of rattling it, the older system dissipates and a new system comes into picture, I think that's a wonderful thing to happen. To me, I'm a confident, I'm an optimist. I think the latter will happen.
Wonderful. Trust with accountability. That is the focus of the policy.
That's right. That's right.
Trust with accountability, policy for all. No policy for the public separately, private separately. Policy is the same for all, because the policy will look after the welfare of everybody in this country.
Absolutely.
Doc, this leads us to a very interesting view on school education. Now, you have made radical suggestions for school education based upon science and how a child develops his mental capabilities. You have done away with much of rote learning. You reduced the curriculum load for the child. You connected the child to society, and you made sure the child learns the skill along the way. And you also made sure that it is graduated based upon the child's ability to learn, to understand, and to grow at the child's pace. So a lot of flexibility has been given, and this flexibility is for the first time that we see in India, which is very modern, which is very scientific. Now tell us, what is your personal expectation about a child that goes through the policy that you are laid down for the school, if implemented properly, and a child who went through the earlier system of schooling, which is based upon rote learning? How do you see the difference? What kind of a student will be the output, and how do you see that child doing well in future?
Based not on my judgment, because I am too old to go through either of the situations. But in the recent times, I have been contacting a lot of school children. And most recently in the complex where I live, I was asked to address the students, the youngsters of this complex, more than 100, 150. And one of the important questions they asked the children is, sir, I am in the transition stage. from the school to the higher education. And after having heard this, I feel that I personally now feel that I should have gone through the school education with the present policy and not with the one which I have gone through. Is there a way I can go back and work in the school, study in the school under the new system before I get to the higher education? Can you tell me a way? This speaks volumes of the mind of the youngsters. They have made a discerning decision that there is something new about it, whether it is in terms of rote learning, doing away with too much of segmentation with the arts and crafts and science and what you may call engineering vocation and things like that. These are all artificially segmented, and then you study something, some science, some silos. This has been all in school education. You don't have any of these distinctions now. There is only one set of things you learn, which is a holistic, integrated education on one side, and you do a part of it in the rote learning. The rote learning part percentage that we have kept is more because, you know, there are things, you are a good example of that. I don't have to say about your rote learning because you remember details. You can reel out numbers. And these numbers is an asset for you to reel out. But we don't want to lose that faculty of the human brain by the fact that you don't have any rote learning. So keep a certain percentage for memory, because that is the other part of it. But otherwise, you try to learn everything in the regular manner where you by experiential learning, you try to do that. So that part of it is well, the thing, doing away with the multiplicity of segmentations as arts, crafts, arts and sciences, engineering and vocational education, crafts and other kinds of things. This is now all those borders are removed. So you have a large spectrum to choose from, and you can create a credit for yourself through that kind of a thing. So you have the credit bank concept. And then the very flexibility to take the exam and you want, I mean, you're prepared, rather than doing all the things at the end of a year where you have to face in 2 weeks all the examination papers. That is done away with. So you can take an examination because you are prepared and you are confident, you can take it. Take it. If you fail and you are not fail, if you are not done that well, make a second attempt. In the future, when computerization takes place in a much bigger way, we can take the examination as often as you want and improve your own standing in the educational system by your decision of when to take the exam and how to perform the exam by your own preparation. So that level of flexibility brings the best out of the human being. You are not allowed, once you have failed, you are failed, and so here you failed class, this is a pass class. That kind of assessment, we should get rid of this kind of a thing. I think all of us have got some very good assets. We also have a lot of deficiencies. I think so long as the assets are continuously improved, I think deficiencies will automatically become less of an evil so far as your life is concerned. And this is very much in the picture of deciding on schooling system today. We think the way in which the initially of the first 5 years of education, we fully make use of the fact that there is a developmental trajectory, non-linear, and therefore unstructured learning. And then unstructured learning, you go to the structured learning, perceptive to conceptual, and conceptual to prescriptive. From prescriptive, you go to the abstract area. So that is the stages in which the mind is able to grapple with the increasing complexity. So you create a curriculum, a pedagogy, which matches with this, and you have a very good system, optimal system within the science, within the bound, with the today's science knowledge allows you to do. That is exactly what the premise is.
Doc, that leads me to another point, and we're going to take more time because I think the talk is very interesting. We're learning a lot from you because it's very incisive. How have school teachers reacted to this policy? Because I'm sure for very many of them, they've been frustrated at being victims. I'm using a big word, victims of a very rigid system which does not allow the flowering of the child, and where there is too much of pressure to do too many things in a short period of time. And most school teachers believe that a child really doesn't fail. Nobody fails. A child only grows at his own pace. Now, in your policy, you allowed the child to grow at his own pace to make sure that nobody is a failure, because all of us grow very differently. But it puts an enormous amount of trust and freedom on the teacher in the school system. How have teachers in school system reacted to you from your interactions?
Well, today I had an interaction with the Vivekananda Youth Organization of Mysore, addressing about 2,000 teachers were there in different parts of the country. And there were some few questions about The number of questions always will be limited in this kind of a thing. Their questions were exactly what they are looking for. Is first and foremost, I think these teachers want to play a more effective role in their profession, and they need an opportunity for that. The opportunity would be the fact that they don't work in silos, number one. So you need to create a complex where you have a cluster, you have more number of teachers, you need experience of other colleagues of yours, contemporaries who would like to interact with you. So one of the things they wanted to know about the complexes, the school complexes and how it will function, so that you will have more number of teachers rather than one teacher, 10 students in some schools, another places, one teacher and 6 subjects taught. There is another class of this thing, all these to be done with. So we need to network school. One of the thing is that we are told that we will like to network and mix our complexes, and the complexes has certain number of primary schools, second middle schools, and one secondary school, and it comes in a structure. This is integrated and administered, and resources are changed. So you have the resources like a playground, a library, the music teacher, arts teacher, those kind of teachers who are less, because you cannot appoint in a class for a school of 100 students, a school team, class teacher, a craft teacher, and this kind of a thing. So all these kind of things can come in by integration of several layers of education, create complex. So that will change the alienation of the teachers also, because they have a community to interact, and also with the students with they interact. Then the other part of it is the teachers have to have also a change in their outlook, because they certainly, you are dealing with a new regime of education, especially I said the 3 years to 8 years, which is the foundation period. Your whole system of how do you develop the pedagogy, how do you teach them, this is based on activity based, play based, inquiry based, and as I said, is a non-structured education. So teachers are not familiar with unstructured education. So you need to create a pedagogy for that and a curricula. A national framework for this kind of a curricula is also being prepared currently. And then the second part of it is how do you go into the multidisciplinary thing. So you need a knowledge which is not necessarily very highly domain oriented. So we have made sure that high level of knowledge, multidisciplinarity, new methods of pedagogy, and a continuous updation of these kind of a thing. These are all the assets in a higher education system today. This is not available in a teacher educational institute, TEIs, which are mushroomed into thousands, and whose utility is being very seriously questioned today. So the policy says either TEI becomes high degree giving autonomous colleges, which are very much multidisciplinary and large segment of students, or shut it down, TEI. But the teachers' education, we have recommended, will go into the higher education system. A BED will be a 4-year course. That 4-year course of BED will have several commonalities with the other undergraduate degrees of the same multidisciplinary institution, which essentially means a youngster who is studying in mechanical engineering of IIT, or an MBBS in an AIMS, or a LLB in a law school, and a teacher working fully, they will be all at par in terms of the initial education is concerned. Then they branch off into BED, the other branch off into BTech, the other part is MBBS. That's all okay. So there is something common. And so the route from which you come, the teacher, comes from the same roots from which an IITian comes, or an AIMS person comes. So you see the stature of the teacher. Obviously, it is very different from a TEI teacher coming and teaching you. That is the principle behind what we have done for higher education, because the higher education institution, multidisciplinarity, the ability to draw upon the resources of HEI for a teacher education system is a must in the future. So educational departments as a part of the higher education thing is to be established. They have to rigorously pursue the best of the teaching methods for the teacher, and the initial part of it under the undergraduate regular program, and then move towards specialization with respect to the education part of it. And then the same department will also conduct research. They work with the National Educational Technology Forum and those kind of a thing. So there is a multiple kind of a dimension for a Department of Education, which will become tomorrow the source of teachers. And we need to create many such departments in the higher education institutions and make sure that we have the right number of teachers, right quality of teachers, and they graduate from institutes which produce the best of BTechs and MBBS or other kinds of professionals in this country. We cannot distinguish. Now teachers have to enjoy that stature and they should get that benefit also of knowledge. And that is what we have made sure it is recommended in this country also.
Doc, we'll now go to higher education. And I want to start with a very fundamental premise that you have made in the policy.
I think it's more.
15 minutes, Doc, we'll know. You don't mind? Because we are very interesting.
Okay. Just,
okay. Doc, you know, the hierarchy of universities, hierarchy of higher education institutions, that is, you have degree giving colleges, you have teaching institutions with research, then research-based institutions. You have created a hierarchy and multidisciplinary in the institution. How is that going to work? How is the classification going to come by? And how are students going to choose where they want to go? And is it going to be on an all India level with the entire system being available as a choice? What is the vision behind that recommendation?
The vision behind the recommendation is the following. You have something like currently, Mohan, 900 odd universities.
Yeah, 975, 51,000 colleges.
You are better with the numbers, so 975. We have got something like 40,000 colleges. I don't know, the number could be much more this way, that way, but around 40,000 colleges. Maybe another 10,000 institutions of polytechnics and other kinds of.
51,000 total.
So 51,000. So this is, and most of them, what do they have? Some of the colleges have got 100 students, 200 students, one teacher. Colleges, I'm telling. And then there are TEAs kind of a thing. And then if you look at the kind of infrastructure that they have, is hardly anything. What is the teaching that is going on? I think they get the certificate all right. Professionally, they are not fully prepared at all. These are the kind of thing that is plaguing the higher education system. And then if you go back to the regular university systems also, if you look at the right type of qualification for the teachers, ability to teach, ability to create new pedagogy, ability to keep track of new developments, and the research part of it, which ties up the teaching and the research into a more composite quality in terms of imparting what you want to impart. If you look at all these kind of things, today we are suffering considerably because you know the number, about 37 million students are studying in this kind of institutions. And if you look at it, your own, one of the reports says about 30% employability, 20% employability. In areas like physics is a little better, engineering a little better. You go down to regular other kind of subjects, decimal, if you say. So that is the situation on employability, job suitability and things like that. So the whole idea of the structuring of the university is to bring in, but one is that the present highly inefficient resources, the teacher quality, and other kinds of things that will dictate a quality education to be done away with. This is one thing that we need to do. The second thing is to make sure that we slowly build up the capability even within colleges, moving towards a level in which they add slowly more and more disciplines and make them multidisciplinary. There are several colleges in this country which are reasonably doing well. You can convert them into a good multidisciplinary institution, give them a graded autonomy and move towards a full autonomy. And when I mean autonomy, administrative, academic, as well as financial, and move from a graded autonomy to the full autonomy. They have and they carry students of the order of 3. The reason why the student number is important up to a particular point, the multidisciplinarity demands that you have students in many of the classes, and they come and they interact. The whole of the campus is vibrant with ideas coming from different directions. You go to MITs and Stanford, you don't see only a physicist or a chemist. You see all kinds of people, all kinds of nutty ideas will be coming out, and from them sometimes Nobel Prizes or trillion-dollar business enterprises. These kind of things are common feature. Now, this is the kind of an environment that should be created in an educational institution. The models are not very different from the model of an MIT or a Stanford. We have to do that. And they are called the so-called research universities. They are the top-class universities where they give equal importance to research and teaching. And then you have to students, they have put 3,000 in our policy. So it could be the 5,000, then to 10,000, it can go to 25,000. I'm sure your Manipal institutions are all destined to become research universities in the coming years with
Yeah,
25,000, I would say.
25,000.
That is a kind of a thing. So that is what we are trying to talk of, to make sure that you create best of the undergraduates, best of the postgraduates, best of the PhDs, and best of the PhDs with cross-cut various disciplines to make sure they are relevant either socially, industrially, strategically, and many other areas, including pure research. So what is the ultimately these kind of universities should be able to indulge in all aspects of human inquiry ultimately. That means essentially every subject that is meaningful in terms of a knowledge has to be brought into the fold for an educational system in a university is concerned. And then this university should be able to provide research as well as teaching, and which essentially means the best of the research workers teach the students. And so you have the best of original thinkers going to the student and challenging them. The students also get an opportunity to be inspired and also question the teacher. So there's a two-way interaction. This is another character of this. The third part of it is that these kind of things, you put a lot of money into research and many of them fail. So the university has to have enough tolerance bandwidth to make sure that the successes and failures are equally treated, because successes will take you further. Failures will be a stepping stone for a more important success.
Hmm.
So just like a grand success, I would also like to have grand failures, which will be the stepping stone for grand successes. So there is another character. And ultimately, the university should have a boundless no boundary, because you should be able to navigate through any system of knowledge from one location to another. This freedom has to be there. So when I talk about university with teaching, this is what is implied. And this is can really create the best minds in the society. And they are not only scientists, they are not only researchers, they are great leaders. So the best thinkers are the great leaders. Don't think that leaders are a class by themselves, they're managers and things like that. Homi Bhabha was a good physicist. That is why he thought of a structure for an atomic energy program with commission and all that. It could not have come out from a regular kind of an administrator. So
Hmm.
you need the basis of creativity and originality, even in formulating structures for big systems. So that is all coming from this kind of education. So that is why teachers with research and teaching, teaching with research, and wherever people want to have a good education, a good job, and is also prepared for shifting the job, because they have a liberal education where their knowledge is much vaster and therefore able to comprehend complex issues, and they can take up a job hopping without much of a difficulty. The autonomous degree giving colleges, and the autonomous degree giving colleges can be located every district of this country, and we have to create it. They normally will have about 3,000 to 5,000 of the students, and best of the facilities, and up to the undergraduate program, they have the first rate education. So which essentially means you are ready for a job, you are ready for even taking up research career, you are ready for doing up any kind of a thing where there's a new challenge and a new direction that is coming up. So this is the levels in which we have done it. The whole idea is to make sure that no education is a wasteful expenditure or a wasteful exercise. And these three level structures, which are based, of course, on years of experience of other institutions all across the world. It's not that everything has been thought out in India. This has got its imprint from some of the best working universities across the world. We think we need to go for. The only thing is, many of the best universities has taken 100 years to come up, including our Institute of Science. We don't have that kind of a time. So we need to expedite this part of it, including, if necessary, getting the best of the foreign support also. So we have also added that in the interim period, when we are trying to accelerate this process of top-class university creation, make sure that also other universities, the best universities across the world, also play a role in trying to create this kind of culture in this country. So we have put some 100 universities across the world who can also come and start this kind of thing, but provided they create a culture in the process within the country. So that is our objective. I think it is well thought out. We have to do away with the existing system. Certainly, we have to break this system totally, and that can be done the choices have to be made in the interim period. There are always problems of choices. But then there are better institutions are coming up. Their grading will be done, their ranking will be done, and the process of selection will be based on that until a certain time. Then the name itself will catch the brand. And if Manipal becomes a brand, you like the MIT, then I don't think you need to have a choice process to go through. The question is whether
Absolutely.
you get in or not.
Doc, my last question
Thank
before we
you.
let you go. Last question, promise you that. You know, in a policy recommendation, you suggested, you looked at governance of governance of universities, and you suggested some structures.
Yeah.
What in your mind and in your outlook is the optimal governance structure for a university of the future? How should it be governed? Considering the fact there are private universities, public universities, there is a government, there's everybody else. How should the structure be, which is ideal in your personal view, having studied this matter, made the recommendation in the policy?
Mohan, there is, we don't have to do fundamental research for this answer. We need to only have a applied research, because there are many institutions in this country which has got good governance systems. You come to the Institute of Science, where I have sat in the council chairman for 10 years. The way the council itself is constituted, the representation of the council, the powers of the council, the role of director and his appointment, and what kind of things he takes approval from the council, whether it is financial, administrative, or academic. And then the question of how the further the growth of the council institute itself is being discussed. They are all a part of a governing council's job. Chair and the chairman of the council is the one who is selected by the members of the council. So the members of the council is nominated by various agencies who are a stakeholder in the institute. And they are normally people with high level of distinction. And there are still a couple of good politicians who are very people like, there have been a couple of good politicians who are also members here. Some of the secretaries of the government of India, MHRD secretary, they are a part of ex officio kind of a thing. But there are also very good academicians. Very rarely do you find any kind of interest other than education and the interest of the institute coming into picture in these kind of groups and discussion. So we have used this kind of a cue that you will have a vice chancellor. If you have a vice chancellor and a new university, you need to create a board or a council kind of a thing, to which the vice chancellor will report, and he reports specifically to the chairman of the board of the council. That particular council will have a true representation, some of them government related, and some of them which is based on the public bodies, and even the local communities can have a representation. So there is a very balanced kind of a recommendation, and excellent, exceptional, qualified people, and academically also will be members of the council. The chairman is also a very eminent person, not that he need to be a exceptionally good academic, but he should be a very well-respected public figure. So that kind of a thing. This is the way in which we want the future educational institution to have. They have autonomy. What do you mean by autonomy is the discussion within this council and decisions are not further questioned. And then the director takes the responsibility of implementing it. And within a certain framework of his responsibility, he has also flexibility. And this flexibility he uses to transmit the levels of responsibilities to the next 3-4 levels. It is not that once you leave the council and the vice chancellor takes over the responsibility, he doesn't allow anybody else to run the institute. He only does. That also is not allowed. We need to make sure that is a graded delegation of responsibilities. Depending on what the role of the person is. It's not that you entrust a very good academic with all the money of the institute. That is not the idea. Just make sure that there are proper delegations which will enable that person to work without a hindrance and hitch. So this is the structure we have. I give you example of the institute only to give you what went into our mind with respect to IITs, institute, All India IIMS, and some of the very good law schools. They have good structures already.
Yes.
And they can be refined depending on the local requirements, and they can be adopted. There is no problem on that. I see that as a least problem, I think. But we should change over to that kind of a system in maybe all the universities in the coming years. That is, I think we have put as a 2030 or something like that.
Yeah.
I don't know exactly what, by which time we should all move over to that kind of a governance system. But we think governor is very important because ultimately they are the guardian of the quality of the university. They're the institutional development plan, and those kind of things are all part of the role of the council or the board to review and approve. And any changes in that also has to be approved as a mid-course correction if that has to be done. So that is how one looks at the governance part of it. We think this is again will be accepted because there is a more better realization today that unless we understand the requirements of a system and not understand the requirements of system of a different nature, I think we will not be able to make progress. And everybody realizes it. That's a good thing about it. So I am very hopeful things will work this way. Private, there is always a question of what will in the private this thing. Certainly, the person who is promoted will have some position in the whole system, but it will be within the framework of transparency and other regulatory things that are existing. So long as that is pursued, this question of whether he occupies this position or that position, he becomes a public figure. He is, after all, a person who has invested money doesn't mean that he's not a public figure. He's only a financier. He's much more than that. So I don't, there nobody will question him if he has got the other kinds of a thing. So I think these things are not very, and people are worried about it because you try to cycle through your own mind about certain things, what will happen to under these circumstances and so on. But those failure mode analysis, we can keep it to space and not for education.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kasturirangan. That is fantastic. I wish we had more time, but you have to go. We know that. You've been very educative, very incisive. We have learned a lot. Thank you very much. Very grateful for this discussion. And I want to hand it over to Dr. Rajan Saxena.
Thank you. Thank you. You have been always wonderful as a questioner. You are very thoughtful. And you have kindled me several times with searching questions. That is what I am because of that.
Thank you, Doc. Thank you, Doc. I think, I wish we had more time. Next time we'll have more time because we are just warming up. Thank you. Thank you. Dr. Saxena.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you very much, Dr. Kasturirangan and Mr. Mohandas Pai. I think this conversation was just wonderful. And this is really borne out by the kind of an engagement that the participants have had in this whole process itself. The chat box is really full with the questions and suggestions that are there. Almost 98% of the participants have taken the poll that we took right now. So can we see the poll results? So here are some of the poll results which have talked about it. This is really talking about it from the perspective of the various questions that are there, sir. And you would clearly see that how engaged the participants have been. We have also had today the participation from Bhutan, Afghanistan, Germany, United States, and Australia. And we've also had advisors who are now part of this entire interactive process, sir. As one of the participants said very clearly, that this whole part of the collaboration or the consultation that you have had has really created a trust, the trust which is so very essential in any kind of a policy formulation. And that has been one of the biggest kind of a part of the policy itself. Thank you, sir. This has been one of the most wonderful sessions that I would have attended as an educator, as an educationist. And sir, more importantly, you were just talking what all of us have dreamt as a teacher, as an academic in this country, as education leaders. This is what we had dreamt, that this is what we want our country to be. And so we are definitely looking forward to seeing that this dream really comes out true. And I can assure you that the Open Ed work will work towards achieving this dream, helping institutions move in this direction. Over to you, Ranjan.
Thank you, sir. Honorable Dr. Kasturirangan, sir, Chairman, National Committee on National Education Policy, Mr. Mohandas Pai, Chairman, RN Capital, Dr. Rajan Saxena, co-founder TOE and former Vice Chancellor NMIS, our most valued invited guests, students, ladies and gentlemen, it's my privilege to have been asked to propose a vote of thanks on this occasion. I, on behalf of the Open Ed work and the education fraternity here, extend a very hearty vote of thanks to all of you for sharing with us your thoughts and findings and opinions today. A big thank you to Dr. Kasturi Rangan for his huge contribution in shaping and framing the national education policy that is going to transform India's education system and will be crucial in helping the country's youth compete globally. We all know that the 21st century intelligent technologies are disrupting the world of work. Transforming and creating a dynamic education system is necessary for the progress of any country and meet the challenging and changing labor market needs. And India is no exception. Progressive technological advancement has had far-reaching and critical consequences on every aspect of our lives today. It is vital that this disruption reflects in our classrooms too. Thank you, sir, for sharing your thoughts and opinions, and that would go a long way in helping the educationists implement them in the institutions and classrooms. I must mention our deep sense of appreciation for Mr. Mohandas Pai for anchoring this tete-a-tete with Dr. Kasturi Rangan and sharing his own thoughts on this very important subject and presenting his point of views from the other side of the table. Thank you, sir, for taking time out to be here with us today. Further, I would like to thank Dr. Saxena, co-founder of the Open Network, for facilitating the event and for the hours of behind-the-scenes work to put this event together. I'd also like to thank all the members of the audience for your active participation and for your time. I cannot thank the entire Open Network team enough for their involvement and their willingness to take on the completion of tasks at the expense of their personal time. And as I end, I'd like to quote a great teacher, Rabindranath Tagore, who had said, "Everything comes to us that belongs to us if we create the capacity to receive it." So let's work together to build our capacities and contribute towards nation building. Thank you one and all, and very much, and a very good night. Thank you.
Just 1 minute before we sign off, I'd like to thank Dr. Vasudha Kamath, my very dear friend and a former Vice Chancellor of SNDT University. And I must say, it's her kind of my outreach to her who really brought Dr. Kasturi Rangan to us. Words are just very few. Words just fail me in thanking her. The long association that I have had with her for a very long time period as an academic friend in the city of Mumbai. So once again, thank you very much. Thank you, Mohan. And thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining this program. Good night.
Thank you, Doc. We'll meet again.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Dr. Kasturi.
Thank you. Bye-bye.